we're gonna be doing a little bit of a debate, a recap, and fun day as well. But like, come on, let's be real. Let's be real. Let's be real. You expected this to happen. I mean, I have to do a recap, right? Like, I mean, it's crazy. We had 120,000 people tuning in here yesterday, 130 almost, and another 100K on the other side. Asman Gold, like this is the thing that a lot of people actually watched. It was the most unemployed Super Bowl of all time, and obviously, I'm going to be talking about that. I'm going to be talking about some aspects of it because, like, I do feel apologetic, because I do feel. In some ways, I feel kind of sad because like my goal yesterday, as you guys probably noticed or you probably heard ahead of time because I kept saying it over and over again, was to have a conversation around the actual situation that matters, which is Israel's mass starvation campaign, and also how my former podcast co-host has like handled himself throughout this process with like an endless sea of harassment, right? Endless sea of harassment towards people that don't have the same perspective that he does. And I guess the apology that I want to start off with is that, I think I should have redirected it further. I think I should have redirected the conversation back to the issues that matter a little bit further. And I think I should have, I don't know, there were on the spot moments. There were on the spot moments where I stood 10 toes down and certainly redirected the conversation. But there were definitely instances where I just like kind of let him get away with saying things and then moving on, even though he was very clearly lying about those things. And I had evidence, I had the information, I could have just pulled it up, but it was very difficult to pull up some of the information. He didn't want me to like show my side all that much. Ultimately, he did most of the work making himself look a certain way to the onlookers. But I do believe that like this is like, I believe personally, because I have a very high bar here for myself, that I wanted to clear in terms of actually getting to the issues that matter and not letting Ethan get away with by, saying things like that he is actually against the genocide and that he is actually admitting to it being a genocide, because his behavior did not make sense. His behavior was inconsistent. You know what I mean? And there was also some issues that I wanted to get to, the conflation of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism that we didn't actually talk about as well. But I don't know what it looked like on the other side. But on my side, even when I'm looking back at the clips, like my audio was not great. So that's something that I have to also definitely take care of. When we're doing Zoom, it's impossible to change the audio. So I cranked up. Wait, it's probably still blown out, actually. I cranked up my gain so I could fix my audio on my end, but Zoom bricked it completely, which was really annoying. Lamau, audio not great, Lamau. None of that happened. You got torched in that debate. Oh, I assume that there's going to be a lot of people like this that come in today, of course, and say stuff like this. Obviously, that's not the case, and we know what you're doing, big dog. But thank you. You'll be seeing a lot of these. As a longtime fan of yours, and also a person that is totally aware of everything that's going on in Israel, I do think that you've lost me as a fan. And it's like, dude, we know what you're doing. It's fine, you can keep presenting it this way. But I hope Dan heeded your message. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I don't think he did. I actually don't know. What is copium? Copium is what these people are doing in the chat when they come in to be like, can you believe Tectone acted like he had an opinion? Yeah, exactly. You will see a lot of people that have no interest in politics whatsoever, once again, who are apolitical in nature, come out against this issue. You should have come prepared with video clips. You can't just wing it again. I did. I had video clips. Yeah. What is this? There's probably a reason why all the people who think Ethan won the debate are either already committed Zionist genocide lovers or anime gaming addicts who spend the 10 years obsessing over being too many black people in video games. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, they also said similar things about Sam Cedar as well. And the Sam Cedar conversation was actually much more amicable because Ethan did not want to blow his load on him in the same way. And Sam could just easily be like, I don't care about these things, in a way that I tried to also do, but he would not give a he would not let me move on to a topic that actually matters, you know? Some in Asman's chat want you to be deported. I'm more American than they are, baby. Yeah. I think a real moderator would have made it a lot better. Dan was not really doing any moderating and had your send clips to Ethan to be on screen. Yeah. Yeah, the structure of it wasn't great. I mean, all things considered, I don't think that it was, I don't think that I did a poor job. Make no mistake. I'm just being, even in the most hypercritical, even being the most hypercritical of myself, regardless of the way that Ethan presented himself, I still wanted to do something here. And the thing I wanted to do was like not cheapen this discussion. And I basically said that last night as well in the aftermath of the debate, where I said like I felt like I prostituted myself, where I did succumb to the whims of Ethan making this about petty drama. But in terms of like getting Ethan to admit certain things that basically destroy a lot of what he had said prior. I mean, I'm diving into it. I didn't even blast off yet. Let me just blast off and then we'll get into it. You slept like a baby in your race car bed, which is somehow known. Yeah, I don't know why he kept saying I have a race car bed. I think he might be mistaking me with Ludwig for thinking I have a race car bed, because I think Ludwig had a race car bed when he was doing his me and the boys got together to try to figure out what was going on, you know? And I think he thinks it's a joke from The Simpsons. Oh, okay. I mean, there was a lot of moments where he was just like making erroneous claims and then walking them back and admitting to lying and smearing just to move on, I think. But yeah. There was also the moment where he was like, your head is small, which I thought was like kind of a funny introduction, because it was like in between him calling me like a vicious anti-Semite. And it's such a funny thing to be like I don't think first of all, it's a meme in my community. You know what I mean? It's something that I've joked about. It's something that I've joked about with him. Right. So it's like, if I'm having a heated debate with like a neo-Nazi, with someone who is truly an anti-Semite, I'm not going to in between shift gears to make I'm not going to shift gears to make jokes where it's like myself and that person have shared as a shared experience. Like, I feel like that's kind of an odd thing. That's like a very weird thing to do. Bye. His chat was reacting how you expected they be. Yeah. Like, some of this stuff just simply doesn't make sense. If he thinks I'm like this vicious anti-Semite, worse than Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes, which is what he said, then the way he is talking to me doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? If this is the case, then he has to have more evidence than, I suspect you bought this incredibly popular anime sword that you did 2 years ago when we had a podcast together as a way to be anti-Semitic. But also, as of 2 days ago, I didn't consider you to be anti-Semitic after the Sam Cedar debate. But as of this very moment, after the conversation that we had, I have now decided you are anti-Semitic. Like, that's a ridiculous assessment. Like, none of that makes sense. The way he was presenting himself basically did not make sense with the arguments that he was presenting. What's sad is the amount of drama slop tubers who clearly don't cover the genocide and make YouTube vids about this debate, not highlighting the fact of how gross Ethan's comments were. Yeah, that's what's most likely going to happen. And it's ironic because, like, this is something that I was arguing against and something that I don't want, right? In terms of like all the slop tubers that cover this kind of stuff exclusively from the fuck Hasan tip. Overzealous has a really good video on this that we watched on the broadcast. It's not as odd as you think, because that was what was a direct attempt to try and find an explodable self-conscious target that would upset and tilt you, but he could describe as only a joke. That's why he devolved into calling you a liar as well. Yeah, it's I don't know. I go back and forth on thinking whether or not Ethan genuinely and legitimately thinks I'm anti-Semitic because of the way he's presented himself. I think he's just. I still land on him assuming. I mean, him hating me and then just like wanting there to be a good reason for him to hate me beyond the fact that his fan base turned on him and it hurt his feelings. Because they did not see him as like an intellectual beacon who had the morally correct position on Israel Palestine, and they didn't treat him with a bit of grace and baby him through the process because the situation was direct, and the conflict in and of itself, the genocide is so severe that it's like impossible for people to not have an unnuanced and very straightforward opinion on it, and it's understandable because this is the one thing that is understandable to have a black and white perspective on, right? So that's what it is, right? Like that's, I think like everything else is just seasoning on top of that, where he just wants to make this argument presentable and not come across as like selfish and obsessive. And I don't think he laid out a convincing case for that. And my goal yesterday was to first and foremost bring it back to the issues and talk about the damage that he has caused by consistently identifying pro-Palestinian content creators who have been critical of Ethan and his coverage as anti-Semites that are worthy of deplatforming through the silly things that they brought forward, through the silly things that he brought forward. He wanted to reconcile with you, but in a way that makes him look good. Basically, you doing concessions is what I got. I think he likes you, but he's hurt. No, I don't think so. I think he despises me. And he said it. See, he said as much in the conversation. He said it multiple times. What is this? Yeah, this is not even a debate tag. This is an incredibly childish thing that he did, which I think did not present him in a good light at all. So I don't know why anyone would look to this and be like, he was so composed.
You don't know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it was on the list. You're lying.
Yeah. I got a free Rolex hat from a friend of mine. I still wear it every now and then.
Yeah, and you're oh wow, who knew?
What? Like none of these are arguments. None of these are counter arguments. It was just like, it was very interesting. Like it was basically just like childlike mockery, and I was fairly composed through it. Like I didn't really eat the bait because I think he was just trying to get something out of me in most of these situations. And if you noticed throughout the conversation, there are moments where I unwind. Okay. But if you notice, the only moments where I unwind is not when he's like calling me an anti-Semite or whatever, or doing petty drama or this kind of shit. It's when he's saying something about Israel that I think is like repulsive or inconsistent with other things that he said about Israel that make no sense when you consider the past year-long conquest to deplatform pro-Palestinian voices. And that was the only time where I was like, dude, shut up. Like he was trying to provoke me, and I didn't really eat that at all. And I suspect maybe the ad-lib stuff was to get me to like pop back at him. I don't know why he also like made fun of me stuttering once. Like, dude, I don't make fun of you for having Tourette's. That would be ableist, right? Like that is an incredibly ableist thing to do. Even if this is like a totally different way to approach it, right? Like you're the way that you're carrying yourself is manic and crazy, not because of your Tourette's, but instead it's because of the things you're saying. And I think potentially he was trying to get me. He was trying to goad me maybe to like respond in kind, so he could be like, "You're being ableist" or something like that. At no point did he do that to Sammy. Of course not. That would look even more ridiculous. Destiny?
What?
Ethan, I don't think
Hasan?
I didn't bring up Destiny. You did.
By your authority, I will decide who's hallucinating. Hasan. Want to do propaganda, remember?
Ethan.
Hasan. Please, calm down. You're getting worked up.
I don't know why you're behaving in such a childish manner. Ethan, I don't think... Anyway, he did that a lot. But yeah, Ethan Klein, regarding the zone of interest comparison, so you're saying everyone living in Israel is living next to a concentration camp? Hasan, yes. Yeah, of course. But again, I know you are still not assuming good faith from Ethan after yesterday. You're too good, King. No, I don't. I did not even expect him to be that good faith in general. I just didn't expect how bad faith he would get. But it doesn't matter because like people who watched it, who already had preconceived notions of Israel Palestine, that have found themselves in this unique slotting ideologically, where they think like Israel's doing a genocide, but also everyone that's resisting against that genocide are also bad. This is an interesting position that American liberals have because of the endless amount of Islamophobic sentiment, the endless amount of Western chauvinism that has been baked into their collective consciousness. Every single militancy, every single organization, every single standing military that has ever resisted against Western forces is always in the wrong until time has passed and they've maybe won some concessions or liberated their country, at which point it's appropriate. But while it's happening, while we're in the process, it's the age-old adage: liberals are for every civil rights movement except the current one. Liberals are for every single anti-war movement except the current one. And that's basically what it is. And there's a lot of weaponization of this kind of attitude from Ethan, whether inadvertently or deliberately. Yeah, people go, IDF and Hamas are in the wrong. It's not a hard concept, but it actually is an incredibly unnuanced position to take. Because no, they're not both in the wrong. It's not a hard concept. One is a significantly worse group than the other. The IDF being the significantly worse group. Okay? That's it. And the reality of the matter is, many people don't want to recognize that, even though it is objectively true. The IDF is far worse a group than Hamas ever could be, whether it is the logistical prowess that they have, or even the fact that with all of the overwhelming power that they have done so much destruction to the Palestinian population, a civilian population. This is why I kept saying over and over again, this is why I kept repeating over and over again that like, this is like Hamas would not exist if the IDF did not exist. Hamas would not exist if the Israeli state wasn't maintaining an apartheid state that is incredibly violent. Dude, him saying that if Anne Frank fought back or killed a Nazi would have changed his opinion of her for the worse, that was absolutely insane. I know. But even when libs decide that much later, a liberation movement was a good thing, they also whitewash it. Yeah, that too. I just got here. So sorry if you went over. Can you explain your views on permissibility of using unrelated citizens as prisoners? Did you mean it's a good war tactic? No, I'm not saying it's a good war tactic at all. I'm saying that there's no other way to take over a ship without, taking over the people that are operating on the ship. The treatment of the hostages is what matters in this situation. And yeah, it probably would have been better if they had released the ship crew beforehand. But I think the reason why they are actually taking over ships and disrupting commercial shipping and also combating against, fighting against even the American Navy that's trying to disrupt that operation thousands of miles away from the American border, by the way. The reason why I think that is, it's not the best thing to do, but it's also the only thing that they have in their arsenal. So yes, I think that ultimately, and many people will agree with this, unless they are totally operating on the boundaries of like, well, these guys are bad and wrong because they're scary and America told me so. If you look at it from the framework of like genocide and who is resisting against genocide and what they are doing within the limited powers that they have, that they absolutely would have to come to terms with the fact that what the Houthis are doing in this framework, resisting against genocide, is correct. It is morally correct, even if some of the methods actually fall short of a standard that you fall short of your own personal standards and mine as well. I hope that 14-month subscriber understands my position on this, because there is no comparison between the Israeli occupying force and Hamas, especially because Hamas is a militant resistance group against the apartheid that is maintained by the Israeli occupying force. That is the major problem. The bigotry of low expectations argument Ethan was trying to use was unbelievable. Yeah. And the reality of the matter is, no matter what happens, you will always have an upper hand when you just posture towards pre-existing social conditioning. When you say, no, these are bad guys, these are terrorists, anyone who tries to explain what they are doing will still be considered bad and wrong. You're defending terrorism. That's it. And for more people, for a lot of people who don't want to examine the situation critically, because at the end of the day, they still have some unexamined biases living in the Western world, they are always going to look at this and go, well, it is at the end of the day like scary brown guys doing stuff, and I don't kind of like that. And that leads people to this weird expectation. It leads people to this weird expectation that Israel is simultaneously committing a genocide, and maybe even you recognize that there has been an apartheid for 76 years, but you shouldn't do anything against it. You can't do anything against it. And the people that are doing something against it are actually in the wrong. They're always in the wrong, whether it's because their own personal domestic affairs are in the wrong, like they're anti-gay, or there's the pink washing that obviously Zionists engage in, the pink washing of Israel, while also simultaneously saying like, well, these guys are homophobic and bad. And it's like, yeah, these countries have not been able to have civil liberation movements because they've been under fire and under blockade or under control over other colonial powers or other regional actors that are far more powerful than they are, because they're being backed by the most powerful nation on the planet, the United States of America. Yeah, but we'll do that. This was Asman's main criticism of you. He can't conceive of the idea of kidnapping unrelated people to try to stop a genocide, mainly because he doesn't see Palestinians as human beings. Yeah, of course, like the guy who initially was banned for like 7 days because he said Palestinians are a inferior culture that deserves to be genocided, are going to wait. Hold on. I'm DMing Chris back on TikTok. Yeah, the guy who got banned for 14 days is going to, of course, be resistant inherently to my position. The debate was emotionally exhausting to watch because Ethan reminded me all the times I had to defend myself against a narcissist. I know a lot of people also infer like their own personal hangups or shortcomings or interpersonal experiences that they've had off of this kind of thing. And I think that's ultimately very parasocial on both ends, What about how many times he pulled up a clip that proved your argument or disproved his? See, that's the other side of this. Like, what is shocking about this? What is shocking about many of the instances? I will say this. Here, if you guys want to know, like, two of the areas that I think were, I'll give you what the areas that I think were just like super dominant throughout the entire conversation, and I'll tell you what my biggest L's were. Okay, in terms of the areas where my biggest, I guess, quote unquote W's were. There are, I believe, around 7, if not more, instances where Ethan basically agreed to my position and even went as far as to apologize for things that he has done in the past. So that's fairly significant. Most of it was from the context nuke, and I think that that's not something to just like lightly cast aside, especially considering that this is supposed to be his pivotal work that he put a lot of effort and research into. There's also obviously many concessions he gave, which I think don't make sense when you factor in the way he has behaved in the past 15 months of this ongoing genocide. But there was also a bunch of instances where he basically admitted, yes, yeah, like I was wrong and I smeared you, which I thought was interesting. I didn't know really how to deal with that, but I don't think anybody actually cares on Team Ethan. It didn't come across like Ethan genuinely gave those concessions to you and instead only said it to move on since he kept saying he was bored of you. Yeah, but like there are so many moments where he just like instantly contradicted himself, where he was like, well, I don't Destiny directly. Okay, you talk to his podcast co-host who is engaged in a blackmail operation against people who have like come out against Destiny in his like sex pest case, right? Like, what do you mean? He uses that same community. He's his best friend. That is not like you've worked alongside him on numerous occasions, like, or even with the ADL example, like, or even the CPS call. I was like, dude, you know my position on this. I don't believe the CPS call in and of itself is appropriate. I don't think anyone should be calling CPS on you or anybody for that matter just because they don't like a content creator. But like, can you please explain to me what my role in this is? And he kept, and then he couldn't really tie it back to me in any capacity aside from, well, you a week ago pulled up a snark subreddit. So I said, okay, can you tell me who called CPS on you? And he had nothing. He had to basically admit, and this is a pivotal part of his like victimhood structure, was the fact that my fans had called CPS on him. That's what he had said, right? Like over and over again. And he somehow tried to tie it back to me. And what's interesting about that is he had to basically admit that he had no evidence whatsoever that it was actually coming from my community at all, or even the snark subreddits. So, and that was, oh, by the way, this chatter saying, honestly, your only L was calling Gila, getting him to admit Gila is a terrorist or something. No, the reason why I brought that up was to expose the double standard, to showcase Ethan's Islamophobia, Ethan's racism in this process, because it plays a big role. I don't have the attitude, and I tried to explain to him over and over again, like, what Gila had done was a night raid. And the only reason why I know what that looks like, what a night raid looks like, and what the actual express purpose of the Israeli occupying force is in conducting those night raids is because of Breaking the Silence. Breaking the Silence is an Israeli philanthropic organization, an Israeli organization that works against the occupation. And it's comprised entirely of former Israeli occupying force veterans. So, of course, I have interviewed people who have been a part of the Israeli occupying force, as well as interviewed people that have been conscientious objectors. So I don't actually hold people's social conditioning when they're young against them. I think that would be silly. It is entirely the opposite of my worldview. It goes against my worldview. I believe everyone can change their attitude. Everyone can change their mentality. My frustration was twofold. One, that he, on the one hand, washed that aside by saying she was 19, it's forced mandatory conscription, but then also simultaneously would turn around and smear a dude and call him a terrorist, which a lot of people still keep claiming over and over again. If you want to get it right, you can get it right. I don't have an issue with, even if he was a Houthi, I would not have an issue with interviewing him, for the record, as I've said over and over again. But yeah, I know you were trying to say can you call Rashad a terrorist, for instance, but not Hila, to get him to understand the double standard. But it seems like you were just trying to call Hila a terrorist, I think. No, because I did say exactly those words, but I guess it gets lost in the conversation when the impact point is getting Ethan to say that his wife could be considered a terrorist just to move on. What is this? Getting love on TikTok?
Hasan.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that, but it doesn't matter. I think he has been using Judaism as a shield to deflect any criticism of his beliefs, and him calling you anti-Semitic is going to mean nothing when it's used against actual legitimate anti-Semites. Yeah. So, yeah, and he asked me how I feel about that as well, and I tried to explain to him, like, I don't hold people's past actions against them as long as they have learned and have grown from their previous positions, because I understand, as someone who lives in the Western world, as someone who lives in America, I understand how powerful social conditioning is. I understand how someone who's 18 years old will join the Israeli Defense Force from their perspective, right? I get that. I totally understand that. I understand how someone can find themselves in that position, but through the cruelty of their actions, like, they should recognize that this is wrong, or at least 10, 20 years down the line, they don't still maintain the position that what they did was good and that still continuously defend the Israeli occupying force. That's my issue. And for people who say, why don't you just, like, off the rip, call her a terrorist or anything like that? I need you to understand something. Like, first of all, I'm talking to an audience of primarily Westerners who don't even care about the issue at hand, who simultaneously consider this to be a genocide because it is, but also only care about the drama aspect of it, revolving around a content creator and his own personal feelings. So clearly, in order to try to pierce that veil, in order to try to penetrate into their collective consciousness, like there is a way to go about it. Okay. Yeah. All of this just don't kidnap innocent people talk. Did Hila Klein not admit to partaking in an illegal raid that led to the kidnapping of innocent people, or did I dream that? Yeah, that's like, he was like, well, we don't know what they did. We don't know what the person did. And it's like, well, the point is they're not supposed to be there at all. So even if that person had like, it doesn't make sense within the logical confines that Ethan has cultivated, where he believes that, according to international law, that settlers are valid military targets, but also simultaneously, it is totally justifiable to do a raid on a Palestinian home because who knows, maybe they actually exercised a valid military target. Is that, exercise violence against a valid military target? Like, that doesn't make sense. That is an inconsistency that he never has to address. And that is what I was trying to get him to address. Do you understand? Because if you believe that settlers are valid military targets, you also have to believe that the illegal occupation of the West Bank is completely, unconditionally unjustifiable, and therefore any kind of military action that you take against someone who is exercising their international human rights law of militant resistance against a valid military target, as he has said, then that's illegal. It's the actions not of the Palestinian in that situation are illegal. The actions of the Israeli occupying force are illegal. Do you think they'll ever stop with this ongoing bullshit? No, because I think this is like about view counts for him in general. People even leftists seem to be struggling with the conversation around sexual assault in relation to the conflict. So those are the two L's that I'm gonna talk about. One, the conversation revolving mass sexual assault, systematic sexual assault directed by Hamas. I will be talking about that extensively. And then the other conversation that I think got lost in the weeds was, I feel like we talked past one another on the Avi Shlaim point, on the point about the Nakba being compared to expulsion and also voluntary migration of Jewish people from surrounding Arab nations. And I think on that one, we definitely talk past one another. And I want to like go back and relitigate it, or I want to go back and understand Ethan's position, because I think one of the main points of contention here always is the fact that Ethan will present something. Ethan will present my position in the worst possible framework to make it seem as though I don't believe certain things that he's bringing forward. And the reality of the matter is there's never been a moment where I have denied that there has not been expulsions of Jewish people or pogroms of Jewish people, especially in the aftermath of 1948, especially in the aftermath of the Nakba. This is something that I have talked about as well over and over and over again. But the problem, but the problem with the Ethan's framework wasn't that there's two problems with Ethan's framework. One, that he believes that I'm denying that Jews were harmed in this process in surrounding Arab nations. I'm not denying that at all. What I'm simply stating is that the trigger point of this all is the Nakba, which is a planned and executed deliberate ethnic cleansing campaign, which is done by one singular ideology, as opposed to the reaction of that from surrounding Arab nations cannot be compared to one another, especially when you factor in the reality that some of these surrounding Arab nations and MENA nations weren't even autonomous at that point. They were literally under the rulership of Vichy France at a certain point, or they were literally under the rulership of under the control of England at a certain point. So the notion that these countries had this organic or, collective, hive-minded anti-Semitism that manifested and exploded is utterly ridiculous in comparison to a planned and deliberate mass expulsion campaign. And the Palestinians had nothing to do with the surrounding Arab nations in any way, shape, or form. Regardless, these are totally separate countries. But the reality of the matter is, he could not see beyond the fact that they were Arabs. He could not see beyond the fact that these are all Arab nations, and they were all Arabs that did this. It was the anti-Semitism of Arabs that caused Jews to become Zionist, which I think is ridiculous. He was reacting as if trauma is binary, yes, no, rather than realizing the scale and scope of these things are vastly different, as well as avoid talking about who was responsible for the infliction of those traumas as well. Yeah. And I think a bastardization of Avi Shlaim's perspective to drive home that point, because he got someone to basically clip from his latest book and his commentary key points that make it seem as though Avi Shlaim's ultimate perspective is that Arabs were forced to become Zionist is I think a great misunderstanding of a historian that has spent most of his work talking against that. Okay, his big point is, you know how there's a double Holocaust or a double genocide theory that a lot of neo-Nazis immediately implemented in the aftermath of World War II? This is known by scholars of history as the double genocide theory, that the USSR also did a genocide, and actually their genocides were far larger in scale and number, and therefore they are the worst party in World War II. It's a way to try to whitewash and launder the reputation of Germany, Nazi Germany. A similar perspective took place in Ethan's commentary, which is the double Nakba almost. Yeah, here's Spencer Gabb saying, I read the first two chapters of the Three Worlds after the debate. Avi Shlaim literally describes the fallacy of a double Nakba like this. The purpose of this narrative is to create a false symmetry between the fate of the two communities. The narrative is not history. It is propaganda of the victors. Read this excerpt highlighted from the same Avi Shlaim Ethan misquoted. Yeah, this is from Three Worlds, Memoirs of an Arab Jew. And this is from the prologue. It is impossible to make sense of this history without the regional context. Post-1950 Arab, Jewish, or Mizrahi history becomes a part of Israel's history and as such is divorced from its wider regional environment. Zionists are only obsessively interested in the first phase of the Arab Jewish history. They are profoundly uninterested in the second. Interested in the first phase is driven not by the search for truth, but by propaganda need to portray the Jews as victims of the endemic Arab persecution, a portrayal that is then used to justify Israel's own atrocious treatment of the Palestinians. A rich, fascinating, and multidimensional history is thus reduced to the quest for ammunition to use in the ongoing war against the Palestinians. This trend reached its climax with the manufacture of the narrative of the Jewish Nakba. According to this narrative, the forced exodus of 850,000 Jews from Arab countries after 1948 amounted to a catastrophe, a Jewish Nakba, at least on par with, if not more devastating in its consequences than the Palestinian Nakba. Variously called the Forgotten Exodus, the Forced Exodus, or the Double Exodus. The purpose of this narrative is to create a false symmetry between the fate of the two communities. This narrative is not history, it is propaganda of the victors. There has never been a moment where I have discounted that there was anti-Semitism that took place, especially during the pan-Arabic nationalist movements, where a lot of these Arabic countries that had aligned themselves with European colonial at the time in an effort to develop sovereignty and nation states, even though they previously were under the rule of the empire, for example. They did do that, and that was a big part of this pan-Arabic nationalist movement that created these nation states to begin with. Nation states whose boundaries were carefully constructed by Western superpowers. Okay? Honest history has to acknowledge the part played by all the governments concerned in causing this man-made tragedy. The main difference is that the Palestinian refugees, for the most part, were ethnically cleansed by the Israeli armed forces, whereas the Arab Jews, with a few exceptions, were given by Arab governments the option of leaving or staying. My book is both a personal record of a complex past and an essay with a political argument. It is a critique of Zionism from the perspective that is rarely heard outside of Israel. So, his pivotal work that Ethan was misquoting unironically seeks to address the argument that Ethan falsely presented in his context nuke, which is why I said I will have Avi Shlaim on. I'm working on it right now with some of my friends to get him on the broadcast to address this with his own personal words, okay? There is perhaps no better way. What? After watching the content, Nuke, I'm suspicious of your intentions, which sucks because I've been watching you steady for 2 weeks. But after your debate with Ethan, I went to his channel, seen that video. Yeah, if you get duped, if you get tricked by that, then I don't know what to tell you, my friend. Okay. Yeah. Here's a couple things that he maintained in this. Here's a couple things that people do usually when saying Hasan is a bad guy. One, they'll say he's a socialist, but also rich, as though this is as at odds with the way I view the world or with anything that I've ever said. It's the second thing that they'll always do is look at him revealing this scary thing. We got him. And the reality of that is you didn't find this. I said it. I said it myself. This is not a secret. If it was a secret, you would have encountered this in private conversation, in private correspondence. You found a clip where I'm talking to Deprogram, a podcast that is conducted by a bunch of people that I like, a bunch of content creators that I like. And in that conversation, I'm talking about something that I've always talked about, which is the importance of agitative propaganda. This is what I do. From a liberal perspective, I hope people understand that this is akin to the de-radicalization initiatives that I partake in. Here, I'll give you a liberalized version of this. What do I do in terms of deprogramming or actively trying to de-radicalize right-wingers? Okay? Right-wingers. It's the same principle. Agitative propaganda is exactly that. When someone thinks all of their problems revolve around trans people and the existence of trans people, and I try to show them that no, it's actually a byproduct of the system that we exist under, capitalism, that's agitative propaganda. Propaganda does not always mean nefarious. I know in America it means nefarious, but it actually does not. Propaganda in and of itself is just telling a story. Okay, this is not something that I shelter. This is not something that I hide. Ethan misuses my brutal honesty in that regard, in terms of what I'm doing, to basically get people to think, oh, he's like lying to you. No, I think it's more honest. It is the exact same thing that I say when I tell you, like, I have my biases, and I will let you know exactly what they are, because everyone has biases, and I think it's important to ahead of time so that people know exactly where you're coming from. That's the difference between someone like myself and, let's say, someone like Fox News or even MSNBC or CNN. Everyone has biases. A big part of what I do is trying to explain to you what the biases of mainstream institutions actually are, so you develop a better understanding of where they're coming from, what they choose to omit, what they choose to focus on in terms of their coverage. This is it. This is my job. Hey, what's good? Anyway, the question that I have for many, if they were to be duped by something like that, where it's like Hasan is nefarious, Hasan is nefariously sheltering his full perspective, why would I voluntarily reveal that in a podcast? That's good. I think the main issue is that you and your points are dense. It's hard to handle by a simple-minded person, bro. They just shut it down immediately, aren't listening. All of this still does not justify the genocide Israelis are committing against Palestinians. No history justifies the genocide. No, I agree. And I think that is important to also recognize over and over again. And that is a major inconsistency within the argument that Ethan was presenting, where he recognizes that there is a genocide, but also simultaneously constantly looking for reasons as to why the Israeli government behaves the way that it has, and historically behaved the way that it has. Problem is lowest common denominator audience response to quick gotchas, and I hate any nuance. I mean, it doesn't matter. I think that there was plenty of quick gotchas as well. It's just like it's one that I was able to achieve plenty of. The problem is no one really cares about that either, because everyone is invested in the conquest of drama. Everyone is invested in the conquest of like their favorite content creator, or maybe not even their favorite content creator, but like content creator that's going up against their content creator that they despise, me in this case. That's why I saw this phenomenon of neo-Nazis, like active neo-Nazi accounts, openly singing the praises of Ethan Klein, a Jewish man, right? There were so many out and about neo-Nazi accounts on Twitter that were like, this Jew destroyed the Islamo-Turk, like that. And the conversation revolved around him saying that like this the bleach sword was anti-Semitic, or Frogan's thumbnail was anti-Semitic. Like, these are not conversations that neo-Nazis would normally entertain at all. The reason why they were entertaining it was precisely because they like, oh, this is it. This is what I was literally talking about. Literal, actual neo-Nazis handshaking with Ethan Piker coming back from the debate with H3H3. This person's name is Haya Saka Aryan, Kaguya's top gal, a straightforward neo-Nazi, right? Like, does this not ring any alarm bells in Ethan's mind as a person who is Jewish, who has Jewish children, who is seeing the growth of anti-Semitism on the timeline, not realizing that these guys actually are more invested, perhaps for some nefarious purpose, in undermining me and my position here? I wonder what that reason is. I wonder why so many people who will spam W Hitler in chats are on board with what Ethan was saying. I don't think that any of these guys are going to recognize this, though. I think at this point, it's because it's so hyper specific to Ethan's own anger, and for guys like this, I don't think this person likes Ethan. I mean, they're a neo-Nazi, right? Like, they probably spot Ethan. Many of the content creators, the drama slop tubers, have actually on Ethan quite frequently and generated tens of millions of views off of on Ethan, sometimes anti-Semitically on Ethan as well. And why are they now on board with Ethan? Is it because my argument is awful and I am just completely wrong? Is it because they disagree? Is it because they also are on Ethan's side, where they also believe that Israel is committing a genocide, but also all these people need to shut the fuck up about it? No, it's because this is an opportunity for them to try and actively undermine the position of someone who they see as an ideological opponent. And they do not see Ethan as an ideological opponent in this regard. This would be akin to if I were to go out and align myself with the likes of Myron Gaines or with the likes of Sneeko. Okay? That is what this would look like, because Myron Gaines presents himself as being pro-Palestine, but he's a neo-Nazi. This would be akin to if I align myself with Candace Owens and then said, look, Candace Owens, even Candace Owens has found out that Ethan is so stupid, or some shit like that. That is what this would look like. If the role reversal here, if Ethan welcoming a lot of these neo-Nazis, a lot of these hateful people that have actually turned their crosshairs on him over and over and over again, if his community doesn't recognize that they're now welcoming these kinds of reactionary sentiments, and that's not ringing any alarm bells for them, it would be akin to me unironically aligning myself with Myron Gaines and Sneeko and Candace Owens, right? Or Dan Bilzerian. These are people with massive audiences, but I don't align myself with them. I actually spend a good deal of time actually on their positions as well. Do you see what I mean? This is something that I don't think the drama girlies will actually understand it. This is something that I don't think the drama girlies will understand. That is a major issue here. Can I say the Twitter accounts of people I'm seeing defending either under my tweets are filled with these gross anti-black tweets, constant slurs, praise some of the worst creators on the internet, Nazi dog whistles, makes me comfortable with my own stances. Only Lord can help to this now. What? Only Lord can reply to this now? Ethan's allegiance was some of the worst reactionaries online, simply because it's so odd. Your sexual assault argument was the worst one to me as a survivor, but I've heard you talk about it, so I know where you're coming from. It did sound like you relied on court cases for sexual assault, which is ass, but watching your previous VODs, I know where you stand. No, I'm gonna get to that in a second as well. Because if you noticed, he did something very nefarious there. He basically, I'll get to that, hold on. But the short and sweet of it on that one was the shocking display of disingenuousness from Ethan on that part, where he said that I was denying the atrocity propaganda that Israel has committed when saying that Hamas-directed systematic rape took place, mass rapes took place on October 7. This is atrocity propaganda that is not new. This has happened throughout all kinds of settler colonial conquest. This is what the American settlers said about the indigenous population, right? This is what the Klein said about black people. This is always like, you have to dehumanize your opponent in order to justify to the rest of the people that like the violence that you are going to subject them to is totally permissible. They're savages. They're barbaric, rapist savages. It is a trope for a particular reason. It is unironically the weaponization of sexual assault. The reason why I also found it particularly gross was because he demonstrated that he didn't even care about what I was saying, or he didn't even care about what anyone was saying in that regard. Simply was just like, oh, you're going to speak over this victim? You're going to speak over this victim? When in fact, the video that he showed of me prior to the victim speaking out was literally me recognizing said victim. There's never been a moment where I've said that there was no rapes that took place, that especially after October 7. I've always maintained the position that there is a likelihood that sexual assaults might have happened on October 7. But the problem here is that Israel has actually destroyed the evidence and made it impossible. And his counter to that was, oh, out of the dignity for the victims, there was no time for forensic examination. And that's ridiculous, because you want justice to be served for the victims. That's what I was saying. I wasn't saying like it's not rape unless it's like prosecutable in court, pics or it didn't happen. And that's what a lot of people are saying in terms of my conversation around circumstantial evidence. The circumstantial evidence in this regard is not the same kind of circumstantial evidence you see in criminal litigation in an American court. This is a preliminary investigation that is supposed to open up the door to a full-blown investigation by the United Nations. That investigation has been blocked of Israel. That is what I was maintaining here. And the reason why it's important to note that is because a lot of the circumstantial evidence that they've actually brought forward in the UN report, by Israel's own admission, has now been undermined through forensic examination. I'll give you an example. It's like when you saw these gruesome images, when you saw gruesome images from October 7, and people pointed to them to say like, no, this person is being raped. This person has been raped. And then those people, the ones that weren't actually killed in the process, came out and said that that did not happen to them. This directly undermines and showcases the importance of going beyond circumstantial evidence in terms of like analysis of footage. Okay, especially when considering that there was plenty of atrocities that took place on October 7. I've never discounted that. It is one of the most horrifying live streamed massacres before what Israel did, of course, which is infinitely more horrifying than October 7, considering what Israel's been doing is a systematic, full-blown execution of all Palestinians and their lives in the Gaza Strip with significantly more sophisticated machinery. But having said that, considering that this was almost entirely live streamed, there was a lot of evidence that instantly undermined secondhand accounts that took place on that day. Okay, but like I said, as far as Ethan utilizing this, like weaponizing sexual assault, it was so insane to me that he went to that length. Especially considering that I'm, of course, going to be amenable to hearing his position on this if there's something that I'm oblivious to in terms of all of the reading that I have done on the mass, systematized mass rape conducted by Hamas on October 7. But the worst part of this was he actually showcased the claims made by someone who I also have recognized, who I've never actually undermined the testimony of. Amit Shoshana, I believe, is her name. And the victim that he pointed to was one that I had actually talked about in the video that he showed, prior to that. And then he claimed that she actually had been sexually assaulted on October 7. It was one of the victims from October 7. This is an important distinction to make. And he basically tried to present this as like, he tried to present this as like me denying rapes, when in fact I was talking about a totally different subject. When people say believe all women, that is that's the whole point of Me Too, is to not reflexively disbelieve women, because that's precisely what people do. There's never been a moment where I've reflexively disbelieved a victim that came out. My question to Ethan was, who are these victims? What are their names that have come out? Because you might know something that I do not know from all of the things that I have read on this matter. And yet he actually didn't, if you noticed, he actually didn't bring forward any names with the exception of the firsthand account testimony of someone who I had also recognized. And the secondary position that I have maintained always, which Ethan at a certain point also recognized that he went back on, is the fact that even if there is an endless amount of, even if there's an endless amount of evidence and it's like verifiable, there have been mass rapes that took place, Israel's reaction is still unjustifiable. You cannot do a genocide. You cannot do a genocide on an entire population that you are the belligerent occupier of because militancy in that process conducted sexual assaults. That is completely unacceptable. Nothing will make genocide acceptable. That is my position. That has always been my position. If you don't mind, I have a clarifying question about an article Ethan read during the rape combo. Yeah. He highly manipulated that segment because as supporters of yours, I was left confused. Hope you don't get undeserving fallout. No, it's fine. I definitely will get fallout from that. Are you kidding me? That was the entire purpose of that conversation. It was designed to invoke a response that can be manipulated in the aftermath. That is the real reason. That's why they went on a full court press on live stream fails and all these other subreddits that they actually brigade to say, see, this is what happened. But I think I still conducted myself as best as I could in that process. And I made sure that every single part of that conversation, I still kept saying, he admitted to lying. Dude, you were underprepared and naive. That's not true. He admitted to literally lying. Here, this is one of the examples, right? Here.
There's
Israel
women that
certainly
come out
lies
and
a
said,
lot,
I
right?
was raped.
What?
There are women on the record, on video, saying I was raped.
Like you're saying, you're saying there are multiple women that are on the record saying I was raped.
Correct.
And I asked him who these women were. And
There's
the only example that he used was Amit Shoshana, which was also a person that I had acknowledged by his own admission, which he openly admitted to lying about. The fact that this escapes people's consciousness is shocking to me because in the aftermath of that segment, he openly recognized that he had lied and he had actually smeared me as someone who did not recognize that sexual assault had taken place at any point. That is not true. So if you think that in and of itself was like a massive gotcha, you're falling for the attempts here. But I totally understand why it would be confusing in the process. You almost didn't use any clips to prove he's a liar, which is important to prove so people can actually listen to what you have to say, but you can make it up when you respond to a video. Well, there's not anything I can do in terms of clips because, he controls the clips. And the part about this that I find unconscionable is the fact that he also turned around and made it seem as though the testimony that she delivered was one that I was actually diminishing when it was one that I actually had recognized. But then he turned around and used her as an example for October 7, a point that he was trying to make, which was that mass rapes had taken place on October 7 and there were victims that had come out. There have not been, from what I have seen, and again, I will go back to this once again, and I'm planning on doing when he kept saying don't speak over the victim, but he didn't give a fuck. We're talking about the right to rape protest was actually discussing. Yeah, exactly. That I plan on going over this, going over that part, especially in the conversation, because I think it's important. If you recall, I think something very nefarious took place in the aftermath of October 7, as you guys know. Obviously, there were plenty of atrocities that Israel could point to, but they needed more, which is precisely the reason why they engaged in atrocity propaganda, right? 40 beheaded babies lit on fire with kerosene, and all of this stuff that took place. Out of all of the heightened atrocity propaganda that Israel had elevated, okay, there was many of them were immediately discounted, right? Many of them were immediately discounted by Israeli media, as a matter of fact. And the reason for why they did that was because these are real victims. These are real victims that were slaughtered, right? So obviously, if you're Israeli media, you have to give them the dignity. You have to give their family members the dignity of understanding what took place. And that's precisely why a lot of that was discounted. The only one that actually was left without any sort of counter position was Hamas-backed systematized rapes that took place on October 7. And I believe the reason why a lot of people were wary of immediately countering that position is because, of course, like there's a high likelihood of rapes taking place, not systematized, but rapes taking place on conflicts. This is my position as well. This is what I said as well over and over again. Ironically enough, in many of the clips that he was actually clipping out of context, I was debating other chatters saying there is still a likelihood that sexual violence took place on October 7 because that is a commonplace event in all conflict. Okay? Having said that, Israel refused any sort of real investigation to take place, and the investigations that came a year after the fact showed or disproved a lot of the initial narratives that they ran with. And that is the issue. Okay? And the real reason why that happened was specifically because they wanted to do atrocity propaganda to justify the genocide. Why did you not bring up Hassan saying Palestinian women don't face systematic sexual violence? Wait, I did bring that up. Anyway, and for the record, like, the reason why I brought up the 40 beheaded babies and flamed babies in their crib stuff is because Ethan and Gila have brought that up far, far, far after it was officially recognized as propaganda that did not take place.
They went on a mission to kill as many people they can, no matter who it is, slaughter as many people as they could until they were stopped.
The mission was to kill civilians.
Yeah.
You can see their war plans. They went specifically to kibbutzim to kill the inhabitants there. Those are not military compounds.
They flamed cribs with babies in them on fire. So, like,
come on, what are we talking about?
They went on a mission.
Yeah, like lit babies on fire and stuff. Like, that's not real. That's just like, why is that still happening? You know what I mean? Why are people still saying that? This is supposed to be an anti-genocide broadcast. Like, do you see what I mean? This doesn't make sense with the attitude that Ethan demonstrated yesterday, or at least like some of the things that he said yesterday.
More first-hand accounts. There's even a person that survived the Nova disaster. They managed to survive it, and then I think maybe a year later or a few months later, they ended up committed suicide because they couldn't bear to live having seen what they saw on that day.
Is there more than one person that committed suicide?
It might be more. For some reason, I don't know the exact number. I know there's for sure one that I know for sure, but there might be more. And I mean, the kind of stuff that they saw was like rape, gang rape,
mutilation, torture.
Yeah. So they had to witness that and could not bear.
Yeah. So this is like
they weren't first.
This is Gila Klein claiming that a No Festival survivor saw rape and gang rape killed themselves because they couldn't deal with the trauma. She cites this as a part of her regurgitation of the genocidal atrocity propaganda, saying there's so much evidence for it. She's referring to a suicide letter that was posted online claiming this over 6 months ago, which has been debunked as a hoax by Israeli reporters a day after it came out. Even Hen Mazik and other Zionist propagandists who shared this initial report were forced to retract it 6 months after the fact that this suicide letter was revealed to be a hoax and was retracted by Israeli media. Gila is still using it as a point in her commentary to justify all the things that unfolded. This is what I mean. Here it is. This is Adam Shafir. A story that ran in recent days about a Nova survivor who saw horrors and committed suicide did not leave a single dry eye. After trying to reach the family to tell their story, the search turned into an investigation. We will reveal tonight in the tube that it is a complete fake. It is not clear what brings people to invent like this, but to cheapen the real plight of survivors and to play with the souls of others is simply disgusting. Do you understand? Like, this is a real weaponization of sexual trauma. This is a real weaponization of fabricated stories. There are plenty of people who then also apologized. There are plenty of people who literally apologized and retracted their story with the suicide letter. But 6 months after the fact, she was still saying it. She was still repeating it. Okay? Remember, even just yesterday, a lot of the pro-Israeli outlets, what did they do here in the United States of America? What did they do? They claimed that Mohsen Mahdawi was actually a terrorist. Mohsen Mahdawi, the student activist, who is a pacifist that was recently released from a detention facility in Vermont after being detained during a naturalization ceremony for the quote-unquote crime of being pro-Palestine and a student activist. What did New York Post and all these other propaganda rags put out about him? They literally clipped nefariously a court case, an accusation in a court case about him going up to random people and saying how much he wanted to kill Jews with an automatic rifle. There was an FBI investigation that was conducted into it, and the investigation actually revealed that this was unsubstantiated. It was ridiculous fucking made up bullshit. And yet they clip the part that the FBI investigation undermines that point, and yet they ran with that regardless. It's just lying. That's all this is. So for the record, with Amit Sosana and her testimony, this is where I disagree with Zay Squirrel, because it falls in the weeds here, because their perspective on this is that she never said it was rape. She said it was sexual assault. I don't care. I don't care to make a distinction between the two. Okay, you can get mad at me if you want, but I do think that it's valid to take her testimony as it is, even if she has changed it throughout this time. Okay, even if it's not a distinction that is important to me in this process, and it's also something that I've actually recognized over and over and over and over again. Now, the other side of this was the Zaka people that was used in the Sheryl Sandberg documentary. The Zaka people that were used in the Sheryl Sandberg documentary were known to be fabulous. They were outed by Israeli media once again to have lied. Okay? Look carefully how Sandberg withdraws back from horror. Yeah, so that's the other side of this. And I believe Ethan used one of the parts of the Sheryl Sandberg documentary. They didn't just lie, they posed bodies. I know, they lied, they posed bodies, they actually disrupted any sort of investigation from taking place. This was a major crisis in Israel at the time, immediately after October 7. I've seen you make arguments against victims being used as props without getting caught up. It wasn't just Ethan that derailed you, but you were vague in your response. I have to assume the attention was being in a larger audience and allow for some drama to keep less regular viewers entertained and learn something for the sake of Palestinians, but you got too caught up in the drama to make points I know you're capable of making. No, I don't think you watched the same debate that I participated in. If you think that it was simply because I wanted to fucking move on and do drama. Are you serious? Anyway, the very fact that they keep saying that like I'm discounting the testimonies that exist is crazy, because there aren't. There are secondhand accounts that have been discounted at this point or are proven to be not true by Israeli authorities. I can't work with not even a third-hand account, but whatever Ethan is claiming is going on. Do you see what I mean? But I'm still, of course, there is for the record, I'm never going to automatically discount new information. If new information has come out that I was oblivious to, that I was unfamiliar with, in terms of the numerous victims coming out through forensic examination in the aftermath, for example, as opposed to what has happened, which is the opposite, because the bodies were moved over to a military facility, and the military facility did conduct some forensic examinations that actually discounted some of the genital mutilation narratives that people were presenting. Because the most extreme version of this is what Rabbi Shmuley was saying, if you recall, where he was like, Palestinians ripped the boobs off of Israeli women and played soccer with them and shit like that. A lot of that gets lost in the conversation because it's so incredible of a claim to make without any evidence whatsoever, that the claim in and of itself obviously discounts the veracity of it. Christ, the New York Times is doing this again. Israeli hostage says she was sexually assaulted and tortured. I mean, I don't think that's a fake news. Hassan is a buy. That is like the most credible reporting on a direct sexual assault from. I think you can just point out the lack of evidence for systematized assault, and most importantly, talk about why you are disputing these claims in the first place, that they are used to support genocide. I feel like we can't definitively say what the scale of sexual violence was or wasn't on 10/7, so we can't seem counterproductive to weed on individual cases disproving one or the other. Don't roll over, but also don't get too in the weeds. No, you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. Yes, 100%. Because yes, the mass rapes conducted by Hamas, like systematic rapes conducted by Hamas, or even mass rapes that have taken place, was a way to basically justify what Israel was doing to the Western world. Okay, to the Western world, it was not enough from their framework, from their perspective, that like they were doing a genocide because of all of the real violence and the atrocities that took place. Like that wasn't enough, so they had to do the barbaric rapist savages trope that settler colonial people who were engaged in settler colonial violence have engaged in the past as well. Nazis themselves have done similar things, like Bloody Sunday. The Klan has done similar things with mass lynchings that took place, and race riots, or rather not race riots, but like pogroms that took place against Black Wall Street, the bombing of Tulsa. If you recall, the bombing of Tulsa revolved around the same old tropes about how black men are violent, promiscuous, sexual beings, and then it was elevated. That pre-existing stereotype, that white supremacist stereotype, was utilized in the bombing of Black Wall Street, in the bombing of Tulsa. Okay, Emmett Till's another example. Like, this is precisely why I think it's important to also carefully go through these claims that are being made. And I think Ethan, on the other hand, was incredibly careless in the claims that he was making, especially when he literally found himself in a lie and openly admitted that he was lying about my analysis over the subject matter. But it didn't even matter to him to openly state that he was lying and smearing me, as he did in real time on this issue, because he knew that ultimately there would be clips that would get pumped all over the fucking timeline to continue the narrative, act like Ethan had actually presented real information. The only verifiable claim that he put forth was literally a claim that I also had read through and had kept repeating over and over again. Bloody Sunday was a sequence of violent events that took place in Bromberg, a Polish city with a sizable German minority, between the 3rd and 4th of September 1939 during the German invasion of Poland. Standing in the path of the German army's advance during the early days of the invasion, tensions quickly escalated in Bromberg between the city's sizable German-speaking minority and its Polish majority. On the 3rd of September, as the Wehrmacht was preparing to assault the city, members of the German minority, working in conjunction with the German intelligence agency, attacked the Polish garrison. Polish soldiers and civilians reacted with violent reprisals against ethnic Germans, who in turn reacted with more violence. A Polish investigation concluded in 2004 that approximately 40 to 50 Poles, between 100 and 300 Germans were killed. The term Bloody Sunday was applied to the events by Nazi propaganda officials who highlighted and exaggerated German casualties. An instruction issued to the press said, "Must show news on the barbarism of Poles against the Germans in Bromberg. The expression Bloody Sunday must enter a permanent term in the dictionary and circumnavigate the globe. For that reason, this term must be continuously underlined." Approximately 200 to 400 Polish hostages were shot in a mass execution in the aftermath of the fall of the city on the 5th of September. Additionally, 50 Polish prisoners of war from Bromberg were accused by Nazi summary courts of taking part in Bloody Sunday and shot. The reprisals compounded violence stemming from the German attempts to pacify the city and the premeditated murder of notable Poles as a part of Operation Tannenberg. As a part of the latter, the Germans murdered 1,200 to 3,000 Polish civilians in Bromberg, in a part of the city that became known as the Valley of Death. That's it.